Okay, so they've all had their shot at asking Jesus questions. They could not defeat him in the arguments. They could not find a puzzle to trap him in, a corner to paint him in. They couldn't do it. They couldn't get the crowds to turn on him. They couldn't get him to say anything incriminating. And eventually he turned the question back on them that they couldn't answer, so they're done discussing things. They're not gonna win this guy, the fight with this guy, by out arguing him. They're not gonna get him by out reasoning him or out arguing him or outperforming him in a public debate. Not gonna happen. So now Jesus has the advantage, and he's going to press the advantage by basically giving these people a big "the reason you suck" speech. If you've ever heard of that, you can go on to Google or the TV Tropes website, and you read. It's a trope in storytelling about sometimes you just got to tell somebody why they suck, and essentially that's what Jesus is doing here. He is about to give the Pharisees a big "the reason you suck" speech here in Matthew 23. Now, Matthew has a lot more to say about this than the other Gospels do, but we know that Jesus had a confrontation with these people here because Mark and Luke do both mention a little bit of this these woes that Jesus is about to pronounce. Mark mentions it in Mark chapter 12 at the very end of the chapter, verses 38 through 40. And Luke, I think, has it in a very similar place. So we know that Jesus did have a confrontation with the Pharisees here that ended in his denunciation of them. At the end of Luke 20, the very end of Luke 20. Matthew just gives us a lot more about what Jesus said. He gives a lot more information about what Jesus said this time. Instead of saying a sentence or two, he had quite a bit to say. Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, "The teachers of the law and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. So you must obey them and do everything they tell you. But do not do what they do." Now, I don't know if this was a literal seat. It may have been. It may have been a literal seat in the synagogues that they sat in. It may have been an actual chair. You know, in their day, the teacher sat down and the students and the rest of the crowd stood up to listen to him. So it could have been an actual chair the teacher sat in, or the leader of the synagogue sat in. Could have been. Or it could just be figuratively, they've taken Moses' position as the authority. So you must obey them and do everything they tell you. But do not do what they do. So what they say they say good stuff. Do what they say, because they say good stuff. But don't do what they do. They are talkers, not doers. What they say is good, so do what they say, but don't do what they do. For they do not practice what they preach. They tie up heavy loads and put them on men's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to receive them. Jesus said he was going to give you a yoke that would help you. His yoke would be easy and light, and his burden would be easy to carry. He was going to help you carry your burdens. Jesus was a carpenter. He probably made yokes. I wouldn't even be surprised if that was his specialty. So he's going to help you carry your burden, but these people are not. Everything they do is done for men to see. They love the attention. They make their phylacteries wide and the tassels on their garments long. They love the place of honor and banquets and the most important seats in the synagogues. They love to be greeted in the marketplace and to have men call them rabbi. We have people today who love the attention. We have people in the media and the politics today who love being in positions of importance and authority. They love it. They can't do without it. They have to have it. They get mad whenever you question them. They can't go without it. But you are not to be called rabbi, for you have only one master, and you are all brothers. And do not call anyone on earth father, for you have one Father, and he is in heaven. Nor are you to be called teacher, for you have one teacher, the Christ, the Messiah, the Anointed. The greatest among you will be your servant. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. That's not a literal command. It's not like we're not ever supposed to tell somebody teacher or father, okay? But it's an attitude issue. Like these people are seeking these great positions for themselves because they love it. They love having these seats. They love being the most important people around. Don't be like that. Don't even think of yourself as a rabbi, even if you are, or a father, even if you are. That's how much you need to strip that mindset out of you. That goes back to the whole, cut out an eye or cut off your hand to get rid of the temptation of sin. Like, do whatever you have to do to remove that temptation or get away from that temptation. In this case, the temptation is to want to be great, to want to be exalted to the high place in society. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You shut the kingdom of heaven in men's faces. You yourselves do not enter, and nor will you let those enter who are trying to. There's a footnote down here saying, Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You devour widows' houses, and for a show make lengthy prayers. Therefore you'll be punished more severely. That's the line that Mark and Luke have in this spot. Matthew has all the rest of the stuff. Mark and Luke just have that. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You travel over land and sea to win a single convert, and when he becomes one, you make him twice as much a son of hell as you are. Remember, hell in this case is Gehenna, the fire pit burning outside Jerusalem. Woe to you, blind guides! You say, if anyone swears by the temple, it means nothing. But if anyone swears by the gold of the temple, he is bound by his oath. You blind fools, which is greater, the gold or the temple that makes the gold sacred? You also say, if anyone swears by the altar, it means nothing. But if anyone swears by the gift on it, he is bound by his oath. You blind men, which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? Therefore, he who swears by the altar swears by it and by everything on it. And he who swears by the temple swears by it and by the one who dwells in it. And he who swears by heaven swears by God's throne and by the one who sits on it. Now, he said back in the Beatitudes, the Sermon on the Mount, don't swear at all. And here he's condemning the attitude behind swearing, putting the things ahead, the created things ahead of the Creator, who provided the things. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give a tenth of your spices, mint, dill, and cumin, but you have neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. It wasn't a bad thing to tithe the tenth of their spices, but they had forgotten some of the basic principles behind what the law was about. You blind guides, you strain out a gnat, but swallow a camel. They're so particular about what they eat that they will strain out little tiny gnats from their drinks, but they will swallow entire unclean animals. And the camel being the largest of the land-based unclean animals. Micah 6:8. He has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Justice, mercy, and faithfulness. They had forgotten the basic things and were obsessed with the technicalities. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You clean the outside of the dish, of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee! First clean the inside of the cup and dish, and then the outside also be clean. That goes back to what he said earlier about it's what comes out of a man that makes him unclean, not what goes into him. They're focused on the external appearances, the cleanliness of what you can see on the outside. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of dead men's bones and everything unclean. In the same way, on the outside you appear to people as righteous, but on the inside you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You build tombs for the prophets, and you decorate the graves of the righteous. And you say, if we had lived in the days of our forefathers, we would not have taken part with them in shedding the blood of the prophets. So you testify against yourselves that you are the descendants of those who murdered the prophets. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they are literally the blood descendants of those people, but they're admitting that they have the same spirit as those who persecuted the prophets in the past. If we'd been there back then, we wouldn't have done it. We're better than that. You're claiming affinity and kinship, even if it's not literal. I don't know if it is, but even if it's not literal, you're claiming kinship with the people who persecuted the prophets in the past, meaning you're no better than they are. Fill up, then, the measure of the sin of your forefathers. So if you're going to engage in the same attitudes and behaviors as those sinners of the past, then you'll drink from the same cup that they drink from. You'll be measured by the same measure they're measured from. You snakes, you brood of vipers, how will you escape being condemned to hell? I mean, that's Gehenna. That's the fire pit outside. This is very similar to what Jeremiah did in Jeremiah 19. We'll read that in a moment. Actually, you know what? Let's go back and read that now. Hell became hell during the days of Jeremiah. He actually took the people outside the city to that valley that would become hell, and had them and gave them a demonstration of what was going to happen. Jeremiah 19. This is what the Lord says. Go and buy a clay jar from a potter. Take along some of the elders of the people and the priests, and go out to the valley of Ben Hinnom. That's the valley of Gehenna. That's the word that in Greek, in the New Testament Greek, is translated hell. So they're going out to hell. They're literally going to hell, near the entrance of the potsherd gate. There proclaim the words I tell you, and say, Hear the word of the Lord, O kings of Judah and people of Jerusalem. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Listen, I am going to bring a disaster on this place that will make the ears of everyone who hears of it tingle. For they have forsaken me and made this a place of foreign gods. They have burned sacrifices in it to gods neither they nor their fathers nor the kings of Judah ever knew, and they have filled this place with the blood of the innocents. They have built the high places of Baal to burn their sons in the fire as offerings to Baal, something I did not command or mention, nor did it even enter my mind. So beware, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when people will no longer call this place Topheth, that means burning drums, or the valley of Ben Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter. In this place I will ruin the plans of Judah and Jerusalem. I will make them fall by the sword before their enemies, at the hands of those who seek their lives, and I will give their carcasses as food to the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth. I will devastate the city and make it an object of scorn. All who pass by will be appalled and will scoff because of all its wounds. I will make them eat the flesh of their sons and daughters. That's during a wartime siege. That's what happens. And they will eat another's flesh during the stress of the siege imposed on them by the enemies who seek their life. That happened in the days of Jeremiah, and it happened 40 years after Jesus when the Romans came against Judea again. Then, he's saying to Jeremiah again, break the jar while those who go with you are watching, and say to them, This is what the Lord Almighty says. I will smash this nation and this city, just as this potter's jar is smashed and cannot be repaired. They will bury the dead in Topheth until there is no more room. This is what I will do to this place and to those who live here, declares the Lord. I will make this city like Topheth. The houses in Jerusalem and those of the kings of Judah will be defiled like this place Topheth. All the houses where they burned incense on the roofs, so all the starry hosts, and poured out drink offerings to other gods. There Jeremiah then returned from Topheth, where the Lord had sent him to prophesy, and stood in the court of the Lord's temple and said to all the people, This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Listen, I am going to bring on this city and the villages around it every disaster I pronounced against them, because they were stiff-necked and would not listen to my words. So when he says, How can you escape going to hell? And when John the Baptist began his ministry by saying the axe at the root of the tree, and we're going to cut it down and throw it into the fire, that's what he's talking about. They're talking about the same thing Jeremiah talked about 600 years earlier, and that invaders are going to come and destroy this city and kill people, and you're going to be left a heap of ruin. How can you escape it? Well, they didn't. 40 years later, that happened. Within 40 years of Jesus' speech here, that happened. Therefore, I am sending you prophets and wise men and teachers. He's done it before. And Jeremiah himself said, I sent the prophets to you over and over again. Or he said through Jeremiah. Remember that phrase Jeremiah used, rising early and sending? Saying, I kept sending them to you. I sent them early in the morning. I kept sending them to you over and over again. You kept rejecting them. And because of that, they lost their city and their temple. And it's going to happen to them again. I knew she would do that, so that's what I kept looking kind of over at the clock for, because I knew that was going to happen. Therefore, I am sending you prophets and wise men and teachers. Some of them you will kill and crucify. Others you will flog in your synagogues and pursue from time to time. He's basically talking about the apostles here, or just the disciples in general. He gave them a preview of that back when he gave them their mission. What was it, Matthew 10 or 11? 10, Matthew 10. He gave them a preview of that. And now he's saying the same thing, but talking to the people who will do the oppressing, who will do the persecuting. And so upon you will come all the righteous blood that has been shed on the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel, that's back in Genesis 4, to the blood of Zechariah son of Berechiah. That's not the Zechariah who has a book in the Bible named after him. That's the Zechariah who was a prophet in the days of Joash, I think. Joash the king, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. The significance of this is that the book in which that information is written, which we call 2 Chronicles, was arranged at the end of their canon. We don't have it there. We have it at the end of our history section, which is about halfway through the Old Testament in our printed copies. But in the Jewish Bible, that book was at the end. So the idea here is that from the beginning to the end, from the first book, Genesis, to the last book, which we call 2 Chronicles, everyone and everyone in between, it's all going to come down on your heads. So upon you will come all the righteous blood that has been shed on the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. I tell you the truth, all this will come upon this generation. What that basically means is that there will still be people alive when this happens who are hearing Jesus speak right then and there. Most of them probably won't be, because it's just still 40 years away. So if you're a middle-aged adult at the time that Jesus is talking, you're not going to be alive to see, and most of the apostles will not be alive to see it, because most of them will have been martyred before that, or at least some of them at least. But there will be people alive at the time that these events happened, which we know from history was about 40 years later, that are hearing Jesus speak at this time. Not everybody, most of them probably not, but there will be some. It will be within living memory. Jesus' words will be within living memory of the time when these things do happen, which will be about 40 years later. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those sent to you, how often I have longed to gather your children together. He's speaking as God here. This is not the man Jesus speaking. This is the eternal divine being God speaking in the form of the man Jesus. How often I have longed to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing. Look, your house is left to you desolate. For I tell you, you will not see me again, until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. They said that earlier. They said that to him on his way into the city. But they're going to say it again when he comes in judgment on them 40 years later for rejecting him now. for rejecting him and all the prophets that he sent to them. Not just rejecting him, but all the prophets. They reject him because they've already rejected all the others. If they hadn't rejected all the others, they wouldn't have rejected him either. But because they have rejected all the others, they have no choice but to reject him too. They have to. It's like he said in those parables. They have to kill the son. They have to kill the heir because they've killed all the servants. If they hadn't killed all the servants ahead of time, they wouldn't have any need to kill the son. But they have to kill the son now because they've already killed all the servants. So we're going to read more about that, Jesus' preview and prediction of that, in the next chapter of Matthew 24-25. And that's we've talked about before when we discussed Mark 13, so it's not new, but it's a very long chapter and very theologically intense, so it's going to take its own session later on.